All right, page 416. We started yesterday. Ve'ela Mishpatim asher tosik. By the way, I was on the plane. I was on the plane leaving Israel. So I told you yesterday I was on the plane about the couple next to me. Yeah, that was great fun. Pete Maravich. Okay, so the first thing the Torah does over here, yesterday we spoke about why it's called the Shulchan Aruch. Now the Torah starts talking about the laws. And you'll notice that the first thing it starts talking about is interpersonal laws between man and his fellow man. And one of the ideas here is that the Torah wants to emphasize, which I always tell you, that there's a Torah, religion is vertical and religion is horizontal. Religion is the relationship between man and God and the relationship between man and man. And people tend to forget about that part of Yiddishkeit is man to man. When you think of religion, they did once a study for college students. The secular colleges, they gave them a paper and they say, draw 10 symbols of Judaism. So they drew a menorah and a Sefer Torah and tefillin and a mezuzah, that sort of thing. Nobody drew a picture of somebody picking somebody up off the ground who just fell. Nobody drew a picture of getting up off the bus for a little old lady to let her sit down. Because people, when you think of religion, you think of devotion upwards. But Yiddishkeit it's upwards and it's sideways. It's vertical and it's horizontal. You got to think about other people. The Torah is coming along. The Torah says we're just given the Torah, right? At Har Sinai. So it finishes with all about the Torah and the Mizbeach. Then we're going to go to build in the next Parsha. Parshas Truma is going to be building a whole Mishkan, the whole tabernacle. And the Torah says, yeah, but where it starts is being careful about other people. And the first person we talk about is somebody who's very downtrodden. Who is it? Says the Torah, Kisikna Eved Ivri, when you buy a Hebrew slave. Now this Hebrew slave is a very intriguing character, because this Hebrew slave is somebody. How do you become a Hebrew slave? And even the word slave is not a good description, because whereas when they buy a Canaanite slave who's a goy, so then he's a slave by all understandings of slave. When you think of a slave, you think of a guy who carries the towels with you when you go to the bathhouse. He polishes your shoes, right? He does slave work for you. A Hebrew, what I call it, is a Hebrew hired hand. Because you're not allowed to make this Hebrew hired hand do activities that are unique to a slave. You can't have him polish your shoes. A Hebrew, an Eved Ivri, you can't have him carry towels with you to the bathhouse. You could only have him do what we would call skilled labor. He could plow your fields and he could build shelves for you, that sort of thing. He can't do something that you would associate with a slave. Now, how do you become a Hebrew hired hand? The Torah has a situation where, let's say, Reuven steals money from Shimon. He steals $1,000 from Shimon. He doesn't have the money to pay back. So what do you do with him in society nowadays? We throw him in jail. Well, then everybody loses. It doesn't help him to pay back the money, just throwing him in jail. So what do? So the Torah has a method. What you do is you take this guy and you put out word that he is for sale, for hire. And unlike a non-Jewish slave, you can't put him on a slave block. A non-Jewish slave, they put on slave blocks. You go to the marketplace and you pick out a slave. You check his muscles and you pull the slave home. A Jewish slave is by word of mouth. And Beis Din puts out word of mouth that Reuven is guilty of stealing from Shimon. Does anybody want to hire Reuven for $1,000 for 6 years? And you pay the $1,000 now to Shimon. So Levi hires Reuven. He pays $1,000. Shimon gets the money. And Reuven, now everybody wins. Levi has somebody on to work for him. Reuven is now theoretically working off his debt, instead of throwing him in jail so he can learn to be a better criminal. Okay, that's why he's called an Eved Ivri, and so much so that the Gemara says you have to be so compassionate on an Eved Ivri. He's a Jew. That's why the Torah Mishpatim starts with this. That religion begins with the compassion. You got a guy who's down and out. Why did he steal? Why did he steal? He was under pressure. He didn't have the money, so he stole. So the Torah says, if you sleep on 2 pillows, he has to sleep on 2 pillows. If you eat steak, he has to eat steak. You can't, everything you do, you got to treat him. The Gemara says so much so that one who purchases a Hebrew slave It's as if he's purchased a master for himself. It's very much like marriage, right? You've purchased a master for yourself. You've taken responsibility, and now you are going to be you've got tremendous responsibility, as opposed to a non-Jewish slave, who you could basically make him do anything. The only thing you can't do with a non-Jewish slave, you can't just mistreat him for the sake of mistreating him. You can't smack him around for no reason. But a Jewish hired hand is somebody who is working for you. He has been hired by you for 6 years. Now, watch this. In begapo yavo begapo yetze. If you hire him alone, he leaves alone. That means he's a single guy. In bal ishahu v'yotzta ishto imo. If you what do you call it? If he's what do you call it? Huh?
Married man.
If he's a married man, so then his wife leaves with him. Well, who said where? How does his wife get into the picture to begin with? The answer is the Torah is teaching you over here that if you hire a Hebrew slave who is married, you have to support his wife and his children. Which is why there's a, what do you call it? Now, this is another one of the kind of bizarre halachas in the Torah. It says Pasuk Dalet, watch this. Imadona vita lo isha. Let's say the master gives him a non-Jewish maidservant. V'yolda lo banim o banos, and she bears children for this Hebrew slave. Ha'isha v'ladea tiyu ledana. The white woman and her children remain with the master. V'hu yetze begapo. He goes out alone. Now we're talking about over here a Jewish man who the master has the rights to give him a non-Jewish maidservant, and he impregnates her for him. A Jewish man's not allowed to live with a non-Jewish woman. This is a specific halacha in the Torah that he is allowed to. Okay? When does this halacha apply? Only if he's married. If he's single, the master cannot give him a non-Jewish maidservant. Okay? Is that bizarre? Is that like counterintuitive? Okay. Now, let's finish this up, then we're going to go back and explain the whole thing. V'mamor yomar ha'eved. Now, let's say at the end of 6 years, the slave says, Ahavti es adoni es ishti v'ezbana. I love my wife and my children. Lo eitzei chavshi. I don't want to go free. I don't want to leave. V'higisha adonov Elohim. He brings him to court. V'higisha el adelas ol ha-mezuzah. He brings him to the door, the doorpost. V'rotza adonov esazdo b'martzea. He drills a hole in his ear. V'avodo l'olam. And the guy serves him forever. And forever does not mean forever. Forever means until the Yovel year, the 50th year. Then in the 50th year, he goes free. Okay? What's going on here? So the Torah is telling you like this. First of all, you got a guy who stole. Now, why did he steal? He stole, obviously, because of financial pressure. Under certain circumstances, he could sell himself because of financial pressure. But the standard Eved Ivri is a guy who has stolen. The guy has stolen, and he needs to be sold. Comes along the Torah says, we got a problem. Let's say he's a single guy. If I find out Lior is on the market for $1,000 for 6 years, what's it going to cost me to have Lior live on my property? Cost me some room and board. I'll pay $1,000, have Lior, okay, room and board. No, I got a guy to build my sukkah. I got a guy to mow the lawn. I got a guy to do all this stuff. Hey, good, it's good to have a single guy on the property. Okay, I don't need any sort of motivation. What if he's a married guy? You got a Hebrew slave who's married, a wife and 7 children. Who the heck wants to take that on? I got to go feed a whole family over here. Who in their right mind is going to do such a thing? So the Torah says we have to have some sort of what's it called? Not a promotion, incentive. I need to give you an incentive. You know what the incentive is? You could give this married guy the maidservant and produce slaves. That's worth money. Slaves are money. That already is worth it. I'll support him and his family. He'll produce more slaves for me. Slaves are worth money. So the Torah says the married guy is allowed to live with her. There are commentaries that say that one of the reasons is a punishment to the married guy's wife. Because if the married guy stole, it's because his wife was putting him under financial pressure. She wanted to upgrade. And therefore her punishment is that her husband lives with the non-Jewish woman. That's one of the commentaries says. But the basic idea is that it's an incentive. Otherwise, no one in their right mind is going to do it. A single guy, and therefore the Torah says, for a single guy, we don't need the incentive. We're not going to let a single Jewish guy live with a maidservant because we don't need that. There's enough incentive. He's a single guy, a nice strapping yeshiva bacher. Hey, take what do you call it? Have Itamar come to your house for 6 years. Right? Got all sorts of good things Itamar could do for you. I need some shelves. I need some shelves put up. I got what do you call it? I gotta fix the walls over there. Go mow the lawn. Go plow the fields. Yeah, why not? What the heck? I gotta pay somebody to do it. May as well pay him to do it. It costs me room and board. But if a guy's a married guy, nobody in their right mind is going to want to do it. That's the basic idea of what's going on over here. They drill his ear. And I saw an interesting, the Chizkuni is one of Rishonim. He says they drill his ear, and the ear goes, they drill his ear, they put him up against the door, they drill his ear. So somebody said, well, the Chizkuni says the reason they do that is because, let's say he runs away. Say he runs away. How could you identify that he's your guy? He's got a hole in his ear. Well, a hole in his ear, there may be a few more guys with holes in their ears. Right? Especially nowadays where men wear. Especially, what's that? Because his ear matches the hole in the door. That they make the hole in the door. It's very interesting that you can see which guy, well, this is my guy. See, his ear fits perfectly against my door. That hole, that he's my guy. Which your guy? No, it's too tall for your guy. Your hole is shorter. Okay, so we'll find your guy. That's what the Chizkuni says. Whatever the case is, he's punished with the drilling because he should have developed within the 6 years. He should have developed the understanding. There are those that say it goes against the door because he believes the door of Parnasa is closed to him. That's why he stole. And it's a reminder to them that Parnasa is in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we hope that 6 years of living with a decent person, and he doesn't want to leave. You know why he doesn't want to leave? Why should I leave? I've got free room and board over here. All I got to do is go work in the fields. I've got free room and board. I don't have anything to worry about. It's like living on kibbutz. Why should I leave? Torah says, well, you should leave because it's not the way a man's supposed to live. That you don't trust in God. That you're so nervous about your parnasa that you have to steal and go have somebody else support you. Go out on your own and live like a mensch and trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's how a Jew is supposed to live. You don't want to do that, so then we're going to have to drill your ear because your ear heard at Har Sinai when Hashem said that the Jewish people are servants to me, not to others. And you ignored that by making your servant, by willingly taking on to be a servant for somebody else, by willingly be servant to somebody else, so then you're what do you call it? You're therefore you're punished and you stay till for 49 years. Now, I was once in, what year was it? In 2003. I remember the date, I'll tell you why. I was in 2003, and I get into this cab. Cab driver is like a beaten down, an old cab, not a very good cab. Cab driver had a yarmulke on, a knitted yarmulke on, and we're driving on Begin Highway, and some car cut us off. He did pulled some shtick over there on the highway. So I just kind of said off the cuff, I said, it's probably an Arab. So the guy says to me, I know them a little better than you do. I could smell a story, So I said, oh. So he told me he was fighting in the 73 war, the Yom Kippur War. He was on the Golan Heights. And his unit was overrun by the Syrians. The entire unit was wiped out, except him and 7 other guys were taken captive by the Syrians. He said he was in prison for 1 year, 6 months, and 3 days. They were captured by the Syrians. And the Syrians, first of all, told them that Israel has been destroyed. He had no way of knowing otherwise because he was, they were overrun. They had no way of knowing. And they tortured him. He said they tortured him physically, psychologically. And at some point, Israel worked out a prisoner exchange with the Syrians. These 8 guys in exchange for 1,000 Syrians or whatever the value is. So they worked out this is after 1 year, 6 months, with 3 days of being in solitary and electric, all sorts of torture. And he said that he had no idea. The prisoners had no idea. And one day they took him out of the Syrians knew there was going to be an exchange. So they took him out of his cell. They cut open his back with a commando knife with no anesthesia, and they inserted a tracking device, and they sealed him up. He didn't know anything about it. He just know that he thought they were just torturing him. And they inserted this device. And then 3 days later, they came to his room. They said, okay, put on your clothes. You're leaving in 15 minutes. because the Syrians knew there was going to be a prisoner exchange, so they wanted, when he comes back to Israel, in Israel, they take him to a base. They take him to an army base. The Syrians want to be able to track him. So they inserted a tracking device in his back and put it. So he told me that he comes back to Israel. In Israel, they're not welcomed back as war heroes. The attitude of the Israeli upper echelon was, you should have died fighting. Right. So it's not like they welcome you back. He never got any reparations from the army. Wow. Never any reparations. He shouldn't have gotten captured. Never got any reparations. He told me his back is bothering him. This is 30 years later. It was in 2003. That's what I remember, it was 2003. His back is bothering him, but the guy Shomer Shabbos. The guy Shomer Shabbos, he davens 3 times a day. So, you wonder, guy's going through a difficult period. What is it, how does the guy do that? The answer is, the Gemara says, an Eved Ivri serves his master by day and at night. During the day he works, and at night he lives with the non-Jewish maidservant. That's the wording of the Gemara. Eved Ivri, an Eved Ivri, a Hebrew servant, serves his master by day and by night. So one of the great commentators, the Nesivos Shalom, he says, that is an allusion to every single Jew, not just the Jew who's been purchased. Every Jew, an Eved Ivri, we are all servants to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And an Eved Ivri serves the master by day and by night. By day is when everything's going well, right? In a good mood, you feel good, you're healthy, you got Parnasa, everything's going well. By night means when things are challenging, when things are difficult, when things aren't going so well. Nighttime is always an idea. Nighttime always alludes to ordeals and frustrations, and when things aren't going so well. So an Eved Ivri, and I remember the guy told me, I remember by the time he finished the story, I was in the cab. By the time he finished telling the story, I remember I was getting queasy. I got out of the cab, I remember I wasn't feeling well. Just the whole story was just like, ooh, it was just, and he wasn't in a good mood either. He wasn't like, and everything is hunky-dory now. He was a very bitter person, as a matter of fact. He was not a happy person. He went through a tremendous difficulty. He got, the government, they turned their back on him. But an Eved Ivri is somebody who serves by day and by night. That refers to, on a literal level, it refers to him, but it refers to every one of us. Every person has difficulties. Every person has, I was on the plane, just not coming back from Los Angeles. I was on the plane. So the plane takes off at, what time does the plane leave? At 7:30 at night. Now, some people want to go to sleep on the plane. When you're flying towards Israel, when you're flying east, so then you got to have Shachris. So the guy that I was traveling with, who happened to sit in business, I sat in coach, he sat in business because he does a lot of flying. So, but he at least brought me in as a guest. So I was able to check in with him before everybody else. I was able to sit in the lounge with him before everybody, go into the airport lounge, which was also interesting. Here you go into this airport lounge, and there's food, there's a whole spread in the airport lounge for the business travelers. And I can't touch it. None of it's kosher. Nice spread, none of it's kosher, except the Coke. They had a Coke machine, so I made sure to drink a lot of Coke. Get my money's worth. Yeah, at least that. So I should feel important. But then you get on the plane. I'm tired. He's tired. He's a guy. So he looked up. He checks. There's something like there's some sort of program based on if the plane takes off on time. What time is Shachris? So we're flying at 7:30, leaving LA at 7:30 at night. It's San Francisco. We're leaving San Francisco at 7:30 at night. Shachris is sometime between 1 and 3 in the morning. And it's a very quick, because the way that works is the time is parallel to the ground. So I always tell people, even when I don't know in advance what it is, as soon as you see any light outside, get up and put on tefillin and say Shema and daven, because by the time, within 15 minutes, you're already, it moves very fast. See, on the plane, we had a daven chakras. That means you could be in a fast asleep on the plane. And then you got to make sure to wake up for chakras. 7 hours. So I wasn't sleeping, but he was in business. So that was the only good part, that he suffered more. He had to get up for chakras. I was already up. Right? But you gotta, you gotta do it. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm already, what do you call it? You gotta do it. That's what it means. You have to serve Hashem by day and by night. Then we got to daven mincha on the plane. Because before we landed in Israel at 7:30 at night. So by the time we landed, it's dark. Yeah. So you got to catch the mincha also on the plane. Then I davened Ma'ariv on the plane. So I figured by the time I get off the plane and get myself and get home, I'm going to be such a wet noodle, I'm going to be too tired, so I decided to daven Ma'ariv on the plane also. I davened Ma'ariv once it got dark, I davened Ma'ariv on the plane too. I was going to be exhausted. But a Jew, it's not always easy. It's not always easy. Sometimes you got to serve. That's when you serve by day and by night. I had a story I told my kids once. This couple gets married. Documented incident. Couple gets married, and 3 months after the wedding, the couple's in a bad car accident, and the husband has his brain stem shattered. Mm-hmm. So he's on a respirator in the hospital, and the doctors say there's no hope. Obviously, there's no recovery here. And the wife comes in. She's obviously devastated. She comes in every day to sit with her husband. And at a certain point, the doctors have him on a life support machine. They said, listen, we have no idea how long this is going to go. And go. In the meantime, time's passing. She decided she has to make a life for herself. And she can't remarry. Her husband's alive, and he can't even give her a get. He's out of function. She's stuck. So she has to make her. So she goes and went to medical school. And every once a week, she would come to the hospital and sit with her husband for 10 minutes. And this is going on. She graduated medical school and eventually became a doctor, and her husband's still alive. And she's stuck. I'm stuck. She's an aguna. She can't do anything. So one day she comes in to sit with her husband for the 10 minutes, so 10 minutes once a week. And because of her medical training, she could tell that he's having a heart attack. And she has one of two choices. She could either push the button and call for help and try to resuscitate him, or she could sit passively and let him die and be released from Gehenna. Oh, no. So without a moment's hesitation, she hits the button and they resuscitate him, they revive him. Then she went to Rav Zilberstein, Rav Yeshiv's son-in-law, is one of the biggest medical poskim today, and she asked him if she was obligated to do that. And Rav Zilberstein said the Torah says, "L'samad adam re'echa," you're not allowed to stand by while your fellow Jew is dying. Right? Torah doesn't distinguish between if he's healthy or he's not healthy. You got to try to save him. Okay, there are times where you could remain passive, but apparently he held this wasn't one of those times. Then he said to her, no one whose ancestors did not stand at Sinai would have been capable of doing something like that. That means, listen, it's not hard. It's hard. It's hard. So I told this story to my kids once at Shalashudas when my kids were little. This was one of those Shalashudas stories, Then you sing Ani Mamin afterwards. Ani Mamin. So the only mistake was my mother was sitting at the table. So my kids are looking like this, and I'm telling them this story. And my mother looks across the table. The kids were little, and my mother looks up, she goes, and then, like, let's get to the happy ending now. Right. So I said to my kids, that was the happy ending. It's not the ending we would have written for the story. The happy ending is that somebody does what Hashem says even when it's difficult. Right? Oh, my mother was ready to shoot me. No, that wasn't. I almost had a happy ending right there, or an unhappy ending, right? So it's like that wasn't what she wanted me to say. But I wanted the kids to understand. Sometimes the what do you call it? That there's a So there was also a situation once where a guy died. And and they were married for a short time. The guy died. They didn't have any children, and he had a younger brother who was about 2 years old. And now, since they had no children, they have to do chalitza. But they can't do chalitza until he's bar mitzvah, which means she's basically trapped for 11 years. She can't marry anybody else, and he can't do chalitza. He can't do it through proxy, and now she's trapped. So they asked Rav Yashiv, what should we do? Rav Yashiv said, you have to do whatever the Torah says to do. That's the halacha. It's not so simple. You understand? That's what it means. An Eved Ivri, he serves the master by day and by night. Sometimes it's difficult. People run into difficulties in life. They're difficult. Okay, anybody can do it when it's easy. The trick is to do it when it's not easy. The trick is to do it when it's not easy. Okay, let's go on. I just want to point out something that the feminists. All I said was feminists. What are you laughing at? All I said was the word.
It's enough.
Something, it is enough. Yeah, more than enough. Something that the feminists overlook. Something that feminists overlook is that, they're always talking about how the Torah were a bunch of male chauvinists and we're anti-women and this, that, the other. So you'll notice that the Torah mentions the marriage relationship twice. Both times are the husband's obligation to the wife. How do you like that? Never talks about a wife's obligation to the husband. In the Gemara and Ksubis, it talks about what a wife has to do for her husband. In the written Torah, it mentions here, at the bottom of page 418, it mentions, this is where we learn the halachas, that it says at the bottom of page 418, Imacheres yikach lo she'era ksusa v'onasa lo yigra. She'era ksusa v'onasa means that a man has an obligation to his wife to provide her food, clothing, and her conjugal rights. But that talks about what the man has to do for his wife. Doesn't talk about what the wife has. Then later on in the Torah, in Parsha Kiseitze, it says when you get married, it says v'simach es ishto, a man has to gladden his wife. V'simach es ishto, a man has to gladden his wife during the first year of marriage. And Rashi takes the pains to point out over there that don't understand that he should rejoice with his wife, which is how the men would want to understand it. Somehow there's got to be something in it for me, right? And you have to gladden your wife. The husband has the obligation. Both times in the Torah talks about the marriage relationship. That the feminists always forget about. That they only know. Why does it say Shalom Asani Isha? that they know. That they know. They discovered it. They discovered America. Yeah. Right, but I feel that it's right. Listen. Yeah. So here you have the Torah says it twice, and both times the husband's obligation. Yeah.
Just how a husband is supposed to in the first year to gladden his wife.
Oh, good question. One of them is, by the letter of the law, a man's not allowed to leave. He's not allowed to be away from home overnight in the first year of marriage, for example. He just treat her, respect her, and honor her. Some men gladden their lives by leaving. Probably most. So I just read a former who was it? He was I think a baseball player. He retired, and then they got divorced. He retired from playing, and he and his wife got divorced. And he said there's a high rate among divorce of professional athletes when they retire because now they spend more time together with their wives. How do you like that? and by the way, part of the secret of marriage, the success of marriage is the idea of absence makes the heart grow fonder. This Hollywood idea that spending more time together is a mistake. It's a very big mistake. The success of marriage is that you've got something to do. A wife in the best of marriages, I once read a great rabbi said this, and it's so true. A wife in the good marriage, when a husband leaves in the morning, she's happy. She doesn't want him chipping, sitting around the house telling her what to do, right? She's happy when he leaves. She's happy when he comes home. And then if he's smart, he goes out again for his daf yomi, and she's happy to see him leave again, right? The nature of the relationship is more is not better. More is not better. That's the nature of the relationship. And that's in a good marriage. In a bad marriage, you got other problems, right? But in a good marriage, the nature of the marriage, people think that Hollywood idea, it doesn't work that way. They lived happily ever after. All the stories, they got married, they lived happily ever after. Oh yeah, when the washing machine broke, they were also happy, right? And when her mother came for an extended visit, they were also happy. When the toilet overflowed on an Erev Shabbos, they were also happy. When they had the flood, they were also happy. They lived happily ever after. All fairy tale nonsense. But you see over here that the Torah saddles the man with the obligations. And he has to support his family. You never heard a feminist talking about that. Oh, I also want to have to support you. No, a man has to support. If a wife works and she comes home and says to her husband one day, by the way, I got interesting news, I quit my job. He's got zero halachic recourse. A man comes home and says to his wife, oh, by the way, I quit my job. And he's not going to support the family? Beis Din, if necessary, could flog him. Hey, Bernie, you're going back to work. No, I decided I don't want to. Oh, yeah? Come here, Chuck. You mean Chuck? His Hebrew name is Chaim. Yeah, he used to be a linebacker in college. Come here, Chuck. And Chuck comes out with the whip. And Bernie says, well, maybe work is a good thing after all. And they could be, what is this? That Hefker Welt over here? You got to go support her. You took on support. Okay. Take a look a little further. If you look in page 422. So the Vilna Gaon, show you, do we have a board? Is there a what do you call it over here? A marker, yeah, okay. So if you look on 422, so you notice that the Torah says like this. A guy injures somebody, and then the Torah says in Pasuk 24, Ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye. Shein tachas shein, page 422, 5 lines to the top. A tooth for a tooth, yad tachas yad, regel tachas regel. So we know that when you injure somebody physically, you do not, you pay monetary compensation. And the Torah says an eye for an eye. Ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye. The Vilna Gaon says, you got to go up there, okay. Is this thing going to go with me? Okay. So the Vilna Gaon says, what does an eye for an eye mean? You pay monetary compensation. That's for all injuries. There's a way of calculating the monetary compensation. But the Vilna Gaon says, the pasuk says, ayin tachas ayin, right? So it's an eye for an eye. Now literally the word tachas means what? Underneath. Now, if you take the aleph beis going downwards, aleph beis gimel in that order, what's the letter underneath an ayin? What's that? Pei. What's the letter under a yud? Chaf. What's the letter under a nun? Samach. Ayin, tachas ayin. What do these letters spell out if you reverse them? Kesef. Ayin, you knocked out somebody's eye. Tachas ayin. You give him what's underneath the ayin, which is kesef. That begs a question then. That begs a question. Was that on video? Yeah, okay, listen. Can't hide anything from the world. What? That begs a question. If that's the case, so why doesn't the Torah just say so? I'd say, ayin, pay kesef. Why does it say it in this cryptic manner that makes it sound like if you ayin tachas, knocked out somebody's eye, you get to knock out his eye? Why does the Torah say that? The answer is the Torah is trying to tell us when you compensate somebody for a physical injury with money, still not full compensation. Just that that's how society functions. You knock out somebody's eye, okay, so you have to pay him money. We have people poking each other's eyes out, right? On the other hand, realize that's what really deserves to happen. The money is not the real compensation would be that the person who knocked out the other guy's eye should lose his eye. That would be the real compensation. But we don't do that. So, but it's said in those terms that you understand that paying money for it isn't full compensation. Right? The Gemara says if you punch somebody, you got to pay him. You got to pay him half a what do you call it? You got to pay him a certain amount of money. So there's a guy. The Gemara says a guy named Hanan Bisha. The Gemara Baba Kabbalah is Hanan Bisha, bad Hanan. Right, that was his name. So Hanan Bisha once hit somebody. So the Beis Din said, okay, you got to pay him. You got to pay him a half of zuz or whatever it was. So, but he only had a full zuz. And the other guy didn't have change. So he hit him again, and he just gave him the full coin. And have change. Okay, slug him again. What the heck? Okay, may as well get my money's worth. Get a full. Why not? That works. I don't know. Whatever it was, it's a decent compensation. But whatever it was, he didn't have. There's another side. The Gemara says that I think it was Rav or Rav Huna. That there was a guy who went around hitting people, and they fined him, and he still went around hitting people. So eventually they severed his hand. The Beis Din severed his hand. Listen, can't have anarchy. He was warned, and he was warned again, and he was warned again, and he wouldn't do it. So they severed his hand. That works. There was a woman who was involved in a profession which was very much discouraged by the Torah. And she wouldn't stop plying her trade. So they cut off her nose. Which called disfigures her. And that puts an end to it. Right? And again, you're not talking about some sort of fundamentalist, Muslim fundamentalist extremists over here. Talking about Beis Din. Listen, you can't have a situation where people are going to, what do you call it? You can't have people walking around hitting each other and doing things that are wrong. We told you once, at a certain point, what are we going to do? Can't leave the place hefker. So I used to, when I was with kids in the house, there's always one kid who's beating up on another with brothers. So a guy would hit his brother, he's bullying, he's beating me up again. Okay, so I had a situation in the house where this was going on periodically with it was usually one of my sons and a daughter. Now this girl had a mouth. And I even said to her, your mouth is as bad as his fist, right? And she could, because it hurts, she could really push the buttons. And so once in a while he would hit her, or he'd hit his brother. And so my way of doing, and I couldn't get him to stop. So what I do is, I said to her in front of him, listen, I'm responsible, they shouldn't hit you. I can't stop him, so I'm paying you compensation. And I would pay the victim. That got him. That he couldn't take. He hit her and now she got paid. He couldn't take it. So if they had any, you like that, huh?
Oh, that's so good.
If they had any brains at all, they would have worked out a partnership. We'll split in the back room over there. But I had nothing. I said that I'm responsible. I can't stop him. I'm paying you. Oh, that stopped him. That he couldn't take. That really burned him up. That he couldn't take. But the what do you call it? So but basically, listen, we can't have the place hefker. You can't have people running hefker over here. So the Torah says, ayin tachas ayin, that you should know. Don't think that the money covers. Money is the best thing we could do. But really it should be, realize that you cost the guy his eye. Okay. All right, we'll keep it here, gentlemen.